today, guys. Thank you so much for your patience. We know you've been waiting anxiously, ready to engage with our panelists tonight. We have four people actually, that are going to be here with us this evening. And we just want to take this time to introduce each one. We have Sarah. Everyone knows Sarah, right? Everyone knows Sarah, who's always here with us, and we just want to take this time to thank Sarah for speaking tonight. Sarah is usually not in this seat, but we're so thankful that you decided to do it, and we pray that we will just learn so much from your experience. We have Stacy with us, who has spoken before, and Stacy is living in Toronto. She loves to travel. She's a teacher, and more than anything, she loves the Lord. Loves to share her experience with others. And we have with us here, again, returning, Pastor Namiko, who is here for the second time. We're so happy to have you back with us. And he is very happy to be here to share his experience. He loves the Lord as well, and just wants to continue to bring others to the Lord through his ministry in various capacities. And last but not least, we have Brother Lance here with us, who I'm also meeting for the first time, and very happy to engage with. Another person who is just so excited about doing the Lord's work in various capacities. And as he shares tonight, I'm sure we'll be able to learn more about him and what he is doing and what he's committed to doing for the Lord. So I'm not going to talk much more about our guests. I'm going to leave some room for them to share. And I just want to get into tonight's program so that you guys can tell us some stuff about yourself as we ask these questions.
Do you need a minute? Yeah.
You guys are hearing my baby's crying in the background.
Because you're a mom.
And my
you're
husband
a mom.
is running.
You go do your go take care of it.
My husband just ran and took them. Yes. Okay. I'm sure you guys have seen that video where the man is in that weather forecast and the child runs in the room, and his maid, his wife, not his maid, his wife.
Okay.
Grabs the child out. So my husband just ran out of the room, guys, with the children. Thank you, and let's continue.
Husband.
So I'm just going to get right into the questions for tonight. Our topic for tonight is an interesting one, just like all the ones we've had before, but this one's about preparing for relationship readiness. And so I'm sure many of us think that we are ready, or we were ready, for those of us that are married. And so I'm just going to get into asking you guys some questions, and just be honest, share openly, be vulnerable. This is a space where we like to just share and connect with each other. So feel free to do that as we get into the questions tonight. My first question for our panelists is going to be, some say, I guess, we're called to marriage, and some don't believe that. So I want to get an idea from you guys what you think about, am I called to marriage, or is that even a thing? Like, what does this mean to you guys? And we could start with anyone. I know two people on the panel tonight is married. Sarah, you're married. Lance, you're married. And Namiko and Stacy, you're on your journey. And so whoever would like to start tonight, just to give me an idea of what you think about this idea of, am I called, or is this even a thing? Mm-hmm. Anyone can start.
I'm going to put Lance on his spot for this one.
I'm trying to hear from the single folk. I mean, I want to hear what they got to say. Then I'll chime in.
That's a good idea, Lance.
I'll let Nomiko go first.
Pass the ball.
I'll let Nomiko. You can handle that one.
Isn't it ladies first? Isn't it ladies first?
Actually, Adam was created first. I just followed. I was followed me.
Oh wow, lovely. Okay, sure. Okay. So can you be called to marriage? Well, I think if we take a look at the biblical example, there were certain people that were called to marriage. You look at Adam and Eve; they were called to that marriage. You look at Isaac; there's examples in the Bible where certain individuals were called to marriage. And then Jesus, I think in Matthew 19, he also says that there are certain people who are called not to be in marriages. Some people were made eunuchs from birth, and he just didn't have it in the plan for them. So I think there's a broad spectrum. I do think so. So this kind of relates to a question of the idea of soulmates. Have you heard of the idea of soulmates? Some of you probably have heard that idea. And I was studying to see if that was a biblical thing, and I can't get into the entire sermon right now or study right now. But the main thing that the conclusion that I came to is that there are more relationships that you shouldn't be in than there are relationships that you should be in. So there's more caution that needs to be exercised than an openness and a freeness to just kind of experiment and explore. So you definitely want God leading you step by step, and I think that's the most important thing.
I think that I can echo some of those sentiments for sure, Namiko. So thank you for sharing that. The desires of your heart, God grants you those desires. And I think that desire of marriage has been implanted inside of you. The desire to like want to be a helpmate as a woman and to go on that journey, because I believe that marriage is a ministry. So it's just, I think it's asking yourself, am I even called to be a helpmate to someone else? Am I called to serve? Am I called to really kind of dedicate my life in terms of helping that person become the best version of themselves? So I think those are questions that we should start with that will help us really kind of understand the idea is marriage something that I want to do? And so when we look at that, it's like also, I guess as a woman, I'm a Christian. And so therefore I go and I ask God, I'm like, even though this is my desire, have you actually, because there's so much going on in life or whatever else, have you called me into a season where, or a lifetime that I will not get married? And if that is the case, then I need to be surrendered to that. So going back to God and asking him, like I had mentioned before, to write my love story regardless. And my love story will include either a earthly man, but guess what? It's still going to include a man because I believe in Jesus. So overall, I think that it's a love story because my life is a love story, regardless if it includes a man or not.
For me, I would ask myself, what does that even mean, the word called? Like if you're a Christian, you kind of have an idea of, what that terminology or that jargon kind of means. Called, is it, how do we measure that? What's the parameters surrounding that? Is it a feeling, or is it something that we base off of a biblical text or something like that? So, of course, not everybody here would understand what being called means, whether it's marriage or work or whatever the case may be. So if I were in that situation, and I would want to know, well, like, how do I even measure it first to begin with? So to answer the question, if being called is a thing, I think yes, because God definitely wants us to act upon, he's a God of intelligence, right? And he uses parameters and principles and all different things. So he expects us to make well-informed, educated, evidence-based decisions. As a result, I would say, okay, what would I use? For me personally, as a Christian, because we're not all Christians here, I use the Bible. I also started to understand that God is a God of impeccable character. And what that means is that I started to see God through my personal life, that, he was kind, he was loving, he was, he was reasonable. So I started to go to him with my wants and my desires. And then as my confidence in the Bible increased, I started to see where the Bible says things like, give God your desires and, trust him with your desires and he will fulfill those desires. So I say, okay, well, that's a paraphrase of Psalm something, something. You guys could drop it in the chat box if you know it by heart, because I can't remember it by heart. 37 or something like that. And I said, okay, so God definitely cares about my desires, right? And I just had to get to a real place that, okay, I want companionship. I don't know what that means. I don't know what to do with it, but I just want companionship. And I think I want a husband eventually. So I started to pray to God and whatnot. Of course, it wasn't just a very easy feat. Anyway, pulling it right back in, I was able to see that God cared about my desires. And and for me personally, I use that as a particular measurement in being called to marriage. In addition to that, as I started to communicate with my now husband, I realized that him and I together would actually make a really, really big dent in Satan's kingdom, for lack of better words, in his realm. So us working together made sense. It wasn't just, the side of it where, he really and truly was wonderful to spend time with, where the companionship was good, where the chemistry was like nice, but it was also that I learned over time that the road that he was on and the road that I was on, it kind of just met really well together in the middle. So today, we work together to help the brokenhearted and just everybody in general, and it just made sense. So yeah, for me, I would say try to determine what called means, and learning God's character. Yeah, but I think yes, it is definitely a thing.
Thank you guys so far. Lance,
Wow,
please.
these are such rich, such rich and dynamic answers. This is great. I always, people know they make little bracelets, WWJD. That what would Jesus do?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to marriage, what would Jesus do?
Mm-hmm. Not get married.
Yeah, that's it right there. Jesus wouldn't get married. Nah, that's a joke, folks. Yeah, I think the question of whether or not one is called is tied directly to that qualification category, that question about qualification. Because essentially, when you look at the original context for marriage there in Genesis chapter 2, or 1 and 2, if you will, there was a concept of contentment. And I don't think, many of us struggle with contentment and being at peace with what we have. And a lot of times we're always looking forward to the things that we want and don't have. So there is that Christian principle of contentment. It's commented on in Philippians chapter 4. And when Paul kind of is comparing extremes, and he's commenting on how he's learned to be content with starvation, or with plenty, or with poverty, or with wealth, those kind of are aligned with those marriage vows, traditional Western marriage vows that one takes, for richer, for poorer, for better, for worse, sickness, and then health, till death do us part. So I think it's a real serious, I personally don't think, outside of committing one's life to Christ, I don't think there's a bigger commitment. Obviously, parenting children is probably right there with it, but it's a serious commitment. And one has to kind of ask themselves, is that a commitment that I'm willing to make? And this kind of goes into motivations and what I'm looking, why do I want to be married? Do I want to be married? Why? What are the pros? What are the cons? Because as it was mentioned earlier, like in 1 Corinthians 7, it talks about marriage, and it kind of says, and I'm saying this very delicately, it kind of says like marriage is a distraction in a good way. It's a distraction. It's making, like, life is very hard. It's very rich and it's beautiful. And you can have joy and peace and all those things that are associated with life, and life with God. But when you add another person to that, it's more difficult. It's just like if you take two people and then you add children, it makes it more difficult. In the sense that with a partner, you're going to be pressed and challenged to demonstrate the love of God and humility and self-sacrifice in a way that you would not with yourself. you know, we're very forgiving to ourselves. We're very understanding. We're very patient with ourselves. But when it comes to other people, not so much. So marriage puts you to that. It pushes you to the furthest, you know, degree of human limitations. And unless you are content with God, it's something that you really got to put a lot of thought and consideration into, more than school, more than career, more than any other life-changing decision, in my opinion.
Thanks so
Can I
much,
just jump
Glenn.
in?
Yes, you can. Yes, go ahead.
Just because there was a question in the chat that's connected, can I address that, or should we just move on?
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to save the question. And the reason I'm going to save it is because I don't want to answer this one and not answer all the others that come in. Okay.
Yeah,
So we're going to
gotcha.
save it to, and I want to address just overall what you guys have said. Lance, every one of you. One thing I want to say is, if anybody might be wondering, oh man, this was heavy, this is a lot. Guys, I'm glad you're all in this room, because I'll be the second one to tell you, marriage is not a joke. It is a journey of sacrifice, consecration, daily, moment by moment. But it's because you love the Lord, and it's because you love the person you've committed to. So I'm very happy that you're all in this room, because you're getting to hear it, the real deal. Yes, there's flowers, and yes, there are bells, but when you hear the real deal, you can truly go before the Lord and ask him if this is really something that he is calling you for, and make sure that you seek to be prepared in him before you walk in this very, very important journey. We're going to continue with our questions for tonight. So what would you guys say are some common things that one can do that could prevent them from being ready? As we talked about how serious this is, what are some things that we tend to do that prevents us from being ready? And we're going to start with.
I'll start.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, nice. Thanks.
Okay, all right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, so again, we're not going to read the verses just for the sake of time, but you know, go meticulously walk through Genesis 1 and 2, and 3 and 4 for that matter, to see the you know, the other side of the coin. But in a perfect world, Genesis 1 and 2 is kind of giving us almost all of the elements of that, you know, readiness that need to be there, at least generally speaking. So like you guys, I don't know if you've heard the sayings before, you know, people say, oh, like you should try everything and do everything you want to do as a single person before you get married. And then they say, oh, a married couple, you should do everything and you want to do and go everywhere you want to go before you add children, because at every stage there's
Yeah, he probably had an interruption. Let's see if he'll come back real quick. All right, so you know, anybody else wants to jump in the meantime? No, Miko?
Yeah, I can jump in. There's quite a few things that he was saying in Genesis that give you a layout of what you want to watch out for before you get into a relationship, and how you know you're ready, in the template of Adam and Eve. But I think probably the biggest thing that I can think of as a principle is the idea of love. Now, when we say love, we think of the songs and stuff like that, but love is not just love. God is love. Love is benevolence. It's being other-centered. So here's the real question. Are you willing to give more than you're willing to take? That's what the marriage relationship is. That's what benevolence is really about. Are you really ready to go into something where you're willing to give more than you're willing to take? And that's kind of, when you get to that point, that's probably a good indicator, because that's what marriage is. When you look at Ephesians chapter 5, you see that Jesus, it says, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church. Well, Jesus let his church kill him. Right? He let her kill him, literally. So the idea is that, and that was in the efforts to save her. He was trying to help her in the process, right? The Jewish church at the time. So the idea is, are you willing to give more than you can take? And that's not saying you should go into a bad marriage. I'm not saying, you know, some sort of codependent kind of crazy situation. No, you should be getting back. You should have a love for a person, but it should be easy. to give to that person. And that's the way that it works. It's like you have that relationship where it's so tight, where giving just feels so natural to that person because they're so giving to you. So that's one way. And I think that's really significant because we live in a time where it's so much about me today. It's so much about self. It's so much about what I want. Like, oh, she doesn't look like this, or he doesn't have that, or you know what I mean? Whereas the healthiest relationships are other-centered, where they're based on high emotional intelligence because you're focused on something else other than yourself.
Thanks, Namiko. So I guess some of the things you're saying that prevents this is, am I still all about me? That might be one of the big things that you're saying there is, am I still all about me? You're looking at what prevents us. I'm still focusing a lot on me. That's what you're getting across there?
Exactly. If you feel like your world is very self-centered, then that's kind of in contradiction to what benevolence, the law of love, is all about. The law of love is, God is love, and he's about being other-centered. And so you want to make your life in that same channel. You want to try to give more than you can take.
All right. Thank you, Namiko. Ladies?
I'll let Sarah go first.
Well, Lance is back. Maybe he can, you want to continue with your point, Lance?
Sure, I'll just make a separate point. That point is gone. Anyways, you know, and back in the Genesis 1 and 2 thing, like so one thing about Adam is Adam wasn't looking for a companion. He wasn't like moping around, talk about, oh man, look at all these animals with somebody, I ain't with nobody. Like that wasn't his mentality. You know, God did a little experiment to measure whether or not God's mind and Adam's minds were connected through the naming of the animals. And once that was done, then God said, it's not good. He didn't say it's evil. He just said it's not good for man to be alone. And then he put Adam to sleep, and he created a companion for him. So Adam had nothing to do with the process. Adam was perfectly content. He had a home, he had a work to do. He had his relationship with God. He knew his role, like everything, he was perfectly complete. So he didn't need this person to complete him per se. But God saw that it would be better for man to understand all of the dynamics of love and mercy and sacrifice by having a relationship. And so God chose to bless him with a partner. And that partner came out of himself. He didn't create something else on the side. It was part of Adam. So in like manner, when we're contemplating, you know, becoming one with another human being, we have to make sure, one of the things we have to do is make sure that we are, you know, we're, as I said before, content and like stable and secure. Those are words that I might use. So for example, if you're 21 years old and you have no idea what you want to do with your life, you might want to go to school, or maybe you're in school, but you're not sure why. You're living with your parents. You don't know where you're going to be in 5 years. And like nothing's clear. You don't want to join yourself to another person in that mindset, because you're not, you don't fully understand what God has called you to do, and you're not actively doing it. And imagine if there's a man, or again, if this is a woman, and then there's a man that's 23, 25, and he doesn't know what he wants to do. He's kind of milling around and trying different things and seeing what he likes. And then you bring two of those kind of insecure, unstable people together. That's a mess that you're going to now involve two people in instead of one. So like things should be very clear. It doesn't mean you can predict the whole future and everything. It just knows like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm going to get it done. This is who I'm going to be in the next 3 years or so. And I'm executing and finishing those goals and objectives before I bring somebody else into that. Because, you know, you want to be clear, because what's going to happen is no matter at what stage you get married, if you get married, you're going to grow and change as a person. You know, you're not the same person at 30 that you were at 20, I would hope. And so if you marry somebody at 21 and then you're 30, you're like, hold up, you know, I like different things. I want to do different things. I have different aspirations. And so you want to minimize as many of those obstacles and incompatibilities as possible. And one way that you do that is kind of be in a settled, stable position where you know where you're at, you know why you're there, you know what you're doing, you believe it's what God has called you to do, and you're kind of content and secure with that. And then, just like Adam, God will add that person if necessary.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that insight. And just a story for myself. When I was younger, when I was living in Canada and whatnot, my loved ones would always say, Sarah, I think you should pursue this, and I think you should pursue that. And the pressure was definitely there. And but I would always say, no, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, because I just didn't know myself. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't explore my talents. I didn't explore the things that I didn't really, what do you call it? I didn't really learn myself, essentially. So as a result, I was insecure as to what I should pursue with my life. And now I'm in a much more, what do you call it? Secure place. And I have, done certain things, but if I would go back in time, I would do so much more. Right. The point of that is to say, when you're single, that is the perfect time to do all that you can do as a single person without any kind of like, you know what, I need to talk to my husband about it. And that's fine. I'm not saying husbands hold or wives hold people back from doing certain things. But the point is, yes, learn about yourself, things that could prevent you from not just acquiring a relationship, but having the having relationship in its fullness and in abundance. Because God says, John 10:10, he wants us to have abundant life. Learn about yourself, learn about the things that you like, learn about the things that you don't like, understand, what your boundaries are. If there are things that, you need to resolve within yourself, if there are principles that you would like to harness for yourself as an individual, set those things now. Some things that could prevent a happy relationship, because I'm all about abundant living, could be things like, I don't know about money, I don't know about health, I do not know about relationships. And relationships doesn't even mean husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend. It could just mean friend to friend. I don't know how to be a friend. So if you don't know how to be a friend to a sister, if you're a sister, right? Or if you don't know how to be a friend to your brother, if you're a man, then how would you be able to come into a marriage and say, you know what, I'm going to fulfill, God's perfect plan for relationships at its climax, So learn about yourself, learn about, life as well. Some things that could prevent relationships is having unfortunately, we've all gone through traumatic, not, I can't say all because I don't know the numbers, but many people have gone through traumatic and unfortunate and heartbreaking events through other relationships. Some of those things may not have been resolved. As a result, we expand those perspectives of those unhealthy relationships into future relationships. And that's a little bit unfair. I have had difficult relationships even with my parent, with one parent that I had in my life. Praise the Lord, it's resolved and everything is happy now. But that affected how I saw other women, right? So when I'm getting married now, who is the other woman that's going to be in my life? It's going to be my husband's sister. It's going to be his mother. It's going to be his aunties. We need to learn how to have healthy relationships, period, right? It means learning how to communicate as an individual, learning how to say, I'm sorry, learning about God, fundamentally. I think that for me, I have found all of my answers through Jesus Christ. And I'm trying to sound like a corny Christian, because I think you guys are Christian, because we might not all be Christian. But I personally haven't tried various avenues, dancing, partying, all kinds of illicits. I have found my most peace and happiness through Jesus Christ. So saying that to say, learn about God, and by learning about God, I would say learn about his character. I cannot emphasize that even more. The Bible says, even if you lay your bed in hell, behold, he is there. So, there's nothing that we could do that is so dark that God cannot reach and cannot help us out of. And I think that if we embark on a relationship with God, and we ask for his help, and we expand our minds and try to develop understanding and intelligences towards self-development, it's powerful. One author, and I'll close with a statement, one author said, our is a paraphrase, our greatest work, something like that, right? But our greatest work of some sort is self-development. Because guess what? If we are, people like to say the best version of ourselves, which I think evolves over time, oh my goodness, we can definitely illuminate and bless society.
Hey, real quick before someone else goes, that point you made, Sarah, was real nice. It's not, a lot of times we think about what, acquiring a relationship, but we're not thinking about what we bring, what we're bringing to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And that sometimes causes a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's
Go ahead, Dave.
Sorry. I think that's a nice segue into, I guess if I'm being really honest, I'm in the season of really kind of understanding that I had a lot of ideals. And what I mean by ideals, you take the time to read these books and ask questions. Like, I love sitting at the table with married couples and be like, okay, so tell me the gems of a relationship. Tell me the ins, and get the behind the stories. And so then now I painted a picture of what my relationship is going to be like. And my relationship was going to be a certain way. We're going to do certain things. We're going to speak a certain way. We're going to play the part. And then reality happens, and you're dealing with a human being who does stuff that irks you to the cores. And so what I had to go back is to the drawing board. I'm flipping to the pages. I'm saying, this doesn't make any sense. It's not coming together. And so now I'm just like, oh, okay. Do I want to marry a real person, or do I want to marry his potential? Do I want to marry his potential? What I think he should be, or what I want him to be? Or do I want him to be real? Like real. Like, tell me his weaknesses, tell me his strengths, and deal with me so that when I get on the other side of I know what I said I did too. And so that's something that I'm dealing with personally, is letting go of my ideals and praying through the process, that asking myself the question is, am I what I want him to be? Do you see what I mean? So what I mean by that is that I have all these ideals, and I'm like, oh no, this. I'm a little fat, so I need to walk some more. Like, if I want someone who is fit, I need to go to the gym and become a little slimmer, right? If I want someone who drinks water, I need to be drinking water. If I need someone who is educated, I need to start reading some books. So I'm saying, like, I'm starting to mirror what it is, and I am the biggest person. The only person I have to live with is with me. And so because the only person I have to live with me, I'm part of the problem. I'm owning it. I am part of the problem. I'm the inhibitor of why I'm dealing with the hot mess. I am the hot mess. And so when I start to clean up stuff, and not just clean it up so it looks perfect, but at times I might mess up, but own my stuff and be comfortable talking about my stuff and being like, hey, this is not who I am. This is just a product of some of the stuff that I'm dealing with. But it's okay. It's okay to mess up. It's okay to say the wrong things, or to do the wrong things, and give myself the same amount of grace I give others is the same amount of grace I need to be giving others. So that's the stuff that is inhibiting me from getting into a relationship. Because remember, I told you, it's been a long time. So I'm rough around the edges, and I'm still learning the process, and that process is not perfect. And it's driving me crazy.
Thank you guys so much for your honesty.
We'll hold you down, Stacey, don't worry.
It's refreshing to hear all the honesty and just the encouragement for those that are thinking about being ready. I just touch on a few key things that you guys said is this. Sarah touched on it, is when we haven't dealt with some of the stuff in our lives. The worst thing to get into a marriage and expect is that your husband is going to replace daddy. And it's the worst thing to get in a marriage and think your wife is going to replace mommy. If you have some stuff you need to sort through, you got to take the time to sort through them, because no one is expected to fill those gaps in our lives. And when you come into a marriage, sometimes it's like, oh, we're here 50-50. No, you need to be 100. You need to come in 100 and he needs to come in 100, vice versa, so that you guys are as a whole. Or when you come in as a whole, as we've all said, is you get to flourish, you get to share. You're so much more yourself, and that person's so much more themselves when you come in having dealt with. Does that mean it's perfect? No, but it means that you're in a better place to then deal with some of the different things that comes with now being committed to a person forever. Stacy touched on ideals, and so I'm going to touch on that question because I think a lot of us have ideals, a lot of us, and I want to hear from the men, especially because a lot of times I'm talking to women and I hear about ideals, but I want to hear from the men. To start out with this question is, how do we decipher through our ideals and what's negotiable and non-negotiable? Sometimes some of the ideals should stay and maybe some of them need to go, but how do we decipher through what can stay and what should go based on our ideals?
I'll go. Hey, yeah, so I mean, some of that stuff, I mean, is real on point that like mental health is a real thing. And please, I would caution everybody, be very, very careful with potential. Like you got to understand, everybody, an axe murderer has potential. Everybody, every human being has potential. So never think like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna settle for this now because in 5 years, if we just pray more, then he's gonna be like this or she's gonna be like that. That is a toxic situation. There's some things you got to work through there if you're starting to make those compromises in your mind. Yeah, I mean, so this gets into like, again, negotiables, non-negotiables. So again, from a Christian biblical perspective, there's a set of standards that the Bible would lay out that I would say, okay, there's certain things that the Bible lays out that are non-negotiable. For me. So like if I choose to live a lifestyle in which I'm not going to smoke, drink, and that kind of stuff, then I'm not gonna join myself forever with a person that smokes and drinks. Like that would be a non-negotiable for me from a biblical standpoint. But then there's also personal preference that's not necessarily evil. Like if somebody does this or doesn't do that, they're not righteous or evil, but it's my preference. And there are some, I think, reasonable and realistic preferences we have that should be honored, and you got to think about that. So like, for example, let's say you like the outdoors. Let's say, for some reason you like camping, and you like hiking, and you like kayaking and all this, you like to travel national parks and do all that stuff. That's a lifestyle. Like not everybody likes that. Some people like maybe enjoy it if they're in it, but they never want to go out and do that stuff. So if you're going to get with somebody and they hate that, then, and you're going to contemplate marrying that person, every time you get excited and you want to go do this, they're going to be like, yeah, I'm all set. Like, I don't want to do that. Like I don't like it. And when you make them do it, they're going to kind of be around aggravated, bitter. They're going to be resent, and they're going to be like, oh, well, if I do this and you got to do, like, you don't want to have that kind of crazy negotiation over something you like doing. So ideally you would want somebody that's compatible with you in that respect. So there's tons and tons of compatibility exercises you can do. So like, again, if you ever got to that point where you say, you know what, I'm ready personally, and you've said this person is the one that I'm going to get with, you need to be going through those counseling or therapy, and you're doing all of that compatibility stuff to figure out, like, do I really know what I like? Do I know what you like? Do we like the same things? Do we not? What am I willing to compromise on? What am I willing to negotiate? Because, and then I'll pass it on after this, one or two of the primary tools that need to be always operating in a marriage and in most relationships is negotiation and compromise. Like you're going to be doing a lot of negotiating and a lot of compromising. And you want to be doing those things a little bit. You don't want to be every day. Hey, what do you want for breakfast? Negotiation, compromise. Hey, you want to go negotiate? You don't want to be negotiating and compromising your way through every day. It's going to be a nightmare.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Lance.
I'll just add to that. A lot of this question has to do with what you do before when you're single, spending that time to know what you like, to actually see what your tastes are, to understand yourself, to grow and to know yourself, so that you can make those decisions before you get into the relationship. Outside of what Elder Lance mentioned, biblical principles, I think everybody should have sort of like their own personal constitution. Like the United States has a constitution, and it's one of the most successful countries in the world because it has certain things in its constitution no other country has, right? Like they have freedom of speech. I live in Canada. We don't have the same kind of freedom of speech to the level so that creates freedom of thought. And that leads to other things where, the government has to make decisions based on that constitution. And in a relationship, you're going to have to make decisions based on who you know yourself to be. And that's going to lead to the success or failure of your relationship. So knowing those things beforehand will help you to succeed. Like a question that's not necessarily might be a non-negotiable is like whether you're going to have kids. A lot of people are just at that stage and age where it's like, you know what, I'm just not sure if I want to have kids. You want to know beforehand, like, okay, do I want to have children? And you want to be able to present that up front from the jump. Like, this is what I'm thinking. This is where I'm seeing this going. And then, yeah, there is that element of compromise. And sometimes things that you were fixed on, you may change your mind because of the person. But as I stated earlier, that's something that might happen because you see how much the person is giving to you and you feel okay giving up something that you felt like I would never give up, And I've heard stories about that where, there've been amazing marriages that were like, they said one person was like, oh, I wanted kids. And then the other person was like, I'm not sure that I wanted kids. And then they made that decision. And it was hard at first, but then after they were both like, okay, yeah, no, that was a great decision for us to do that, But there was so much love there. Initially, there was so much of a connection and so much of just a benevolent spirit there that it worked out, And so it really comes down to knowing yourself, spending that time to know yourself, to know what you like, and then when you meet the person, to see how that fits with that other person.
Mm-hmm. I can. One of the things that I think about for myself in terms of like the idea of non-negotiables and compromise is asking yourself what type of relationship it is that you want to exist in, and knowing what type of relationship is. For example, for myself, I know that I want to the relationship to exist with a foundation of friendship. And what I mean by friendship is understanding that I actually not just love this person and growing more and more in love with this person, but we're actually friends. So I like being around them. And it doesn't necessarily always have to have a romantic connotation, but we could just sit there and reason and talk in our undies, or we're just out and about and we're just hanging out and we have like a personal interest in each other. And so what I mean by that is just like, how you sit there, and I know it sounds idealistic, but it's something that I really do value is friendship. And so like you actually check for that person. It's like that person is my ride or die. I can call them up and it's just like this. It's like chemistry. And Lance, are you laughing at me?
Yeah, I don't be having conversation with my boys in my undies though.
Not like if you were out at a like a out at a like a cottage and you guys just woke up. Do you see what I mean? Like you're in your underwear.
Oh, okay, I got
right?
you. Yeah.
And that's your boys. Like you're not gonna just go hang out with your boys and you're in your underwears and you're like, you guys are just there and you're just like chilling and it's great. You're just kicking it. And you have to be like, oh shucks, like let me go put on some more clothes because I'm with my boys. No, this is your boys.
That sounds like some girl stuff though, for real. Like, we don't do that though. It's okay.
See, I'm the opposite gender. I don't know what guys do, but yeah. So let's just move past that. Sarah, I'll let you take over. Yeah. So yeah, we got a little bit of jokes.
You're muted, Sarah. Sarah, you're muted.
No, I was just saying, like, I haven't even done that as a woman. But anyway, my auntie always said to me, she said, Sarah, you should never pick up a project. All right? Never pick up a project. So, 1 second, sorry. Yes, sorry about that. I think that in order to decipher, the question is saying, how do I decipher? You have to keep your eyes wide open and your heart, in terms of like, the emotional part of the brain, just kind of like, limited. Give that guy a string and just keep pulling him back and her back. Anyway, just, think logically. I after having gone through the process myself, not too far distant, I think personally that courtship is harder than marriage. I'm having the time of my life now in marriage as a result of doing all the work possible in courtship, digging up all the, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and talking it through with my counselor. Fun fact, Lance Wilbur and his wife were my counselors. Well, our counselors. And that was, as you could see, that was a process. So anyway, we are a product of them. Praise the Lord. He actually officiated my wedding as well, was one of the officiants. And, he could probably attest to this, that, we had a lot of things to work through. We had a lot of conversations to have. We had a lot of lessons to learn, and we went through those lessons. So I'm not saying go ahead and take the risk and jump into a courtship with someone. But if you are there right now, I am all for doing the conversations with the counselors right now. I really and truly don't want to get engaged to somebody and then have to like break up with them. However, that takes place too, and that's fine. So yeah, in order to decipher, determine from now, especially if you're young, and when I say young, like prone to emotional impulsivity. Sorry to put you in a category, but that's like probably less than 25 years old. As we get older, we do tend to adult a little bit better. But try to say, you know what, okay, heart, let me just like pull you right back. Let me think, let me look at some, principles. Let me look at some manufacturer's instructions, which is, the word of God, some counsels and stuff like that. Let me call Jillian, let me call Lance, let me talk to people who's been there, done that. And unfortunately, I had gone through a lot of my youth learning from experience. And I really, really wish, like now when I look back, I really wish I didn't. Experience for me personally has been the worst teacher. I learned, but, I felt it as I learned. So to decipher, learn about yourself, try to mature a little bit, try to, like my father would say, grow up. And then you could probably, when you see a pseudo versus a real saint, then you can say, all right, yeah, this is the real deal. You're muted.
I'm going to jump into my last question. Thank you guys so much for your honest input. So would you guys say that it looks different for male or female? This idea of readiness, would you say it looks different? Mm-hmm. And I would like to hear what that means. What does the difference look like?
That's a good question. I think that this definitely has a lot of deeper, conversations to be had in terms of like roles and roles within the home and so forth. I'll just share my experience. I saw my role as a homemaker. I saw my role as the queen of the house, so and then it was also things that I enjoyed. And this is just, this is just a part of, living in a house with somebody, right? So in terms of getting ready, I my husband can definitely, like, I don't even cook breakfast for him. He makes breakfast for me. So he makes most of our lunches sometimes, and I'm happy with that. But anyway, I don't want to give you guys too much of my personal life right about now. But I am comfortable. I am comfortable being a woman. I'm comfortable with learning how to bake bread and, cooking food. I just like to cook, so I figured like I just need to be ready in general. Like I need to know how to take care of my business. And I just kind of took that into my marriage. I didn't necessarily go and take any like extra, like any extra kind of like tutoring lessons or anything like that to be wife ready. For the most part, the readying, the preparation process for me took place in having lots and lots and lots and lots of conversations with my counselors, and as well as like my second mothers, my spiritual mothers. So they said, okay, Sarah, here are some biblical principles. And we had some hard conversations based upon things that I've gone through in my past and things I was struggling with and whatever. And they said, okay, here's how you can learn. I gave those people permission. And over time, God blessed me with people that meshed really well with my personality. So they were able to say straight up, you know what I mean? So I don't know if it's different. I think that it generally is the same. I feel personally that both man and woman needs to know how to take care of themselves, learn how to make money, learn how to, pay their own bills and stuff like that. However, I'm a huge advocate for the priesthood method, where the man of the house definitely, in all aspects is a protector of the home. Doesn't mean it makes him any less of a man. Definitely not. I can make more money than Sean and he's okay with that. He can make more money with me and I'm really okay with that. So it's just a matter of, what your values are.
Yeah, yeah, just to add, like, so I think there's definitely like gender specific readiness, but then I think there's also general readiness, like we, kind of some of the things we already talked about. For men, I think it's not different probably for women, but I mean, again, it's very important to know and be secure in who you are and what your place is, in society. Like it's very difficult to not know that and to kind of be, milling around or kind of scattered or working in a job that you don't really like. Like you want to feel, like competent and validated, right? So it's very, very difficult because even some men have grown up in situations where, they might be saying, like, I grew up in a single parent household, my mother raised me. So there's that, you don't really know what being a man looks like in practical terms, but but you were that was kind of put on you when you were a little kid, like some expectations of like, protecting the home and making money or doing, there's these weird unsaid expectations. And then there's also like the feeling of inadequacy if you don't measure up to that expectation. Even if it's not articulated, it seems like people are expecting something out of you, right? So you don't want to get in a relationship where you still have that insecurity and then maybe they're expecting you to do something. Like it creates a very difficult dynamic. So one thing I think for men especially is have that kind of security and confidence in what you are doing, and it doesn't have to be something making a whole lot of money. You just know that I'm doing this for this reason. Like there's mission, purpose associated with what you're doing, so that you're not threatened or, sensitive and exposed by insecurity when that might be challenged or that might be called into question.
Yeah, I would add to that, basically ambition and life direction. Because when you meet your significant other, like the way that the Bible describes the relationship between Adam and Eve is like they're helping each other. The word is helpmeet in one version of the Bible, but it's basically like Adam's there to help her in her journey and she's there to help Adam. So like he needs to know what he's inviting her to, and like the picture that you see in the Bible is like this picture of like Adam, he's like this gardener, and like he's like, oh, did you see the roses bloom? And then she comes over, she's like, yeah, I did. And they're like amazed at the same thing. So there's an interest in what they're both doing at the same time. There's an enjoyment that's taking place. And because he's going to come home at the end of the day and talk about that, right? Like whatever it is that he's doing each day. So I think there should be an understanding of that for a guy, especially. And the other thing that kind of goes with that, and you'll see this in cultures around the world, they have something called a dowry, where, a man will have to prove his financial worth, that he can actually, like what he does is good enough to provide for her, because most often is the case that she can't provide for herself when she's pregnant, or when she's taking care of children. So that's something that God kind of put into the Bible, into cultures around the world. And so a guy should have something that he's good at, and that he's passionate about, and that should help kind of drive him, because like there's a Bible text that says there's nothing better than for a man to enjoy the labor of his hands. Like for a man to be happy, it's an essential thing for you to enjoy what you do, because you wake up in the morning and it contributes to your happiness. You have a drive, you have a goal, and when he's happier, it helps her to be happier, because he's like, oh man, sweetie, I'm going to go and do this, and then I'm going to get this money, and then I'm going to do this for you, and it's this kind of like looping feedback that can happen in a positive way. So that for a man, I think that's one thing that's really, really important to, as Lance had said, ambition, direction, in a purpose in a career.
Yeah, and just let me say also that this is also like another like vulnerability that you should try to mitigate before you enter into a relationship. Like as far as compatibility is concerned, there should be mutual interests and mission and purpose and ambition associated with what both spouses choose to do for a life work. So it doesn't mean that, for example, if one's a doctor, then you have to marry a doctor or something like that. It just means that if both spouses don't take a very sincere and intentional interest in the life work or career of the other spouse, then it creates a massive vulnerability. You know what I'm saying? And you feel like, oh, they don't care. They don't understand what I go through. They don't care about me. They don't care what I do. And you start to get this little underlying, resentment, or even if it's not resentment, it's just some aloofness to not really knowing what your spouse spends most of their day doing, or what they're passionate about. And that creates a vulnerability where somebody else can step into that vacuum and show interest and give that feedback, and it can create lots of problems.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I want to just give some practical tips that I have been doing myself personally. And oftentimes, I think that seeking to be an interesting person, and I don't mean from like, just like interesting in a sense where if there's talents and things that you want to do, then do them. So that when you bring to the table, you're not just there to look at the other person live their life. And so read. I know it sounds simple, but read and educate yourself so that not only are you progressing in life, but you're able to speak to your husband, even if you stay home or if you go out or whatever it might be. Just read and educate yourself in such a way where you remain interesting. The other thing too is, do you know about your body? Half the time I'm still learning about different parts about my body. And so do you even know, if you desire to have children, can you even have children? Have you had your yearly physical? Have you taken care of different parts? Do you know about the things that happen in the month of the year, because we're with a male audience, like what's happening and what's happening during that time? And so when you start to take care of your body, you can actually speak from a place of intellect to say, yes, I can conceive, or actually this is not happening. So that person does not get on the other side and say, hey, this is actually, the truth of the matter is, no, you're actually speaking about it from the other side. The other thing that is really, really interesting that you can do is being able to pursue yourself. And what I mean by pursue yourself is that you are getting to know yourself so much that when you get into a relationship or you're being pursued, you're able to discern what works. Is it actually working? If it's not working, then it's just not going to work. And then you won't be in this place of confusion. You won't be in this place of like questioning. You'll be able to know that it's actually working. And so those are just some practical tips that I am currently pursuing myself. I'm like, I'm reading, I'm learning, I'm growing. And that process is beautiful because you're developing bit by bit, and then you'll look back and be like, whoa, I learned a new language. I picked up a instrument. I did this, I did these different things. And so when you meet that person, they're on their journey, and then you guys are going, Sarah said this to me, shoulder to shoulder. It's just like shoulder to shoulder, which is really lovely.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much. I think it's so valuable, the things you guys have shared tonight. And I really think that each person in the room, I see a lot of questions coming in. They're asking so many questions as you guys are talking, and I'm hoping we get to touch on a few of them. I'm going to give us a few more minutes so we can ask these questions and really get you guys to answer them as short as you can, so that we can get maybe about 3 or so questions in from our guests here tonight. So I'm going to actually open the floor for, I know hands are being raised in the beginning. I'm going to open the floor for you guys to ask some questions. If you have a question, unmute your mic and ask the question. Please raise your hand and we could see you. Raise your hand and we could see you, and you can then unmute your mic. I know there were lots of questions in the chat.
So I have some questions that we harnessed from the chat.
Oh,
I don't know
that's
if you want me
awesome.
to. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to read some.
I see some of them here, actually. I'll just ask.
Okay.
So I'll ask the first one here. So how do you know when you are not called to marriage? Wow. How do you know when you're not called to marriage exactly?
So I think that probably came from the thing that I mentioned in the beginning. Number one, if you don't feel like you want to be married, if you have zero interest in being married, chances are you probably are not called to be married. If like you had zero interest in it from childhood. I know for me, from like I was 7 years old, I've always wanted to be married. I always wanted to have a family because it was just I saw my mom kiss my dad, and I'm like, that's beautiful. That makes sense. I want that, And so there's that. There's sometimes a life calling that you might have that may inhibit you from wanting to get married. Like, let's say you're doing some sort of work that keeps you super duper involved and you love what you do. You want to be an astronaut, you want to go to Mars or something like that. Maybe marriage is not for you. I don't know what other specific callings it might fall to. And then there's the other option of, these are options that like Jesus kind of mentioned. He says, there's certain people who are eunuchs from birth. They just never had that desire. There's certain people who make that decision because of something that they want in life, something that they're pursuing, or there's people that don't want marriage because of some experience in life, some outside thing, some outside factor influenced their life to the degree where it's like either it was trauma or it was some outside force basically affected them to the point where they don't want marriage. You can still you can still get married after, and you can get healing from trauma and still go into a marriage, but that's kind of some of the principles that are laid out for the idea of it's possible that, yeah, maybe marriage wasn't for you. And especially now in this day and age, human beings are more selfish. I'm really reading that point. Human beings are more selfish now than we ever have been. And marriage is a thing where it's like, it's about love, it's about giving and being there for the other person. And so just knowing that it's something that's more taxing in a more selfish age, a more self-centered age rather, you just got to be aware of that when you're going into it.
Thank you so much, Namiko.
I just wanted to
cover. You want to touch on it, Sarah? Go ahead quickly, please.
Yeah, like you were talking about the traumas, and right now actually I'm in conversation with someone, in dialogue with somebody about something like that, and just saying, Sarah, like I want the kids, but I don't want the wife because I'm afraid of commitments. And I said, well, marriage isn't for you, because if you have the kids now and you don't have the marriage, and the children no longer have that unit, then what's going to happen to them? And I absolutely think that healing can take place there, but I don't think it's fair. So temporarily, perhaps if in the future you might be willing to put in the work, I don't think marriage is for you. If you're not ready to commit and go the full 9 yards, I don't think marriage is for you.
Thank you. I'm just gonna run on to this. Sorry, go ahead, Lance.
No, I was just gonna say, like, that goes back to the question of qualification. So am I qualified? Kind of ties into the call. So like it's better to assess whether or not you're qualified rather than worrying about, am I called to marriage? Am I called to marry? Am I called? Like, all right, let's say I am. Am I ready to be married? And if not, then let me go start there. And I think the called question will come after, if that makes sense.
And I'll just add to that, and the person. Like, you're not married. Like, most of us don't drive down the road looking at the empty seat beside you and being like, God, when are you gonna fill that? Like, it should be that you meet a person that activates that like, it may not have, that switch may not have been on for you before, but then you meet somebody that's like, whoa, I didn't know this existed, and so therefore now I'm interested. You know, I think too often we just think of ourselves as like, oh, I just got to fill this space, but it's, you don't want a placeholder person. You want somebody that turns on the idea that, wow, they're awakening me to a love that God literally put here on the planet for me. So think of it in that way. I think it's a better way.
That's awesome. That's
Very
really great. Really, really great. Thank you for that.
And also,
Um,
just very quickly, very quickly, I'll speed it. I'll say a very speedy sentence. It's just like how we go to school and we learn and we grow. It happens when we meet someone. It's when we're learning and we're growing that we're able to meet that person to help us to continue to learn and grow.
mhm. It was said earlier in the conversation that marriage is a very selfless, or it calls us to be our most selfless person. And while it challenges that, that's what we need to bring to the table in order to really be in a marriage. And so someone asked, how much do we take? How much do we take from someone? Because sometimes it's like, it's so much, you need a double portion of the Holy Spirit to really deal with what sometimes your spouse is bringing to the table. So how much do you really take from someone?
I mean, I'll jump out on the limb and say, I mean, the commitment is a death commitment. So barring some kind of extreme, destructive, toxic behavior like abuse, you know, or, you know, just reckless adultery, like there's no, that's why the, you know, those traditional vows are, you know, sickness, health, better, worse, richer or poor. Like, you're committing to be with that person. You're not committing to be with that person at their best. You're committing to be with them at their worst. You know, and so whatever, however dark that hole gets, you're saying, no matter how dark it gets, I'm committing myself to this person forever. It doesn't mean there are not exceptions to that rule. It just means that it's supposed to go as far. You think of the commitment Christ made to us, it goes as far as, you know, infinity, like it doesn't end.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is kind of a weird thought, but like that, like sickness and in health, most of us are just like, I've heard people say that, like, oh man, if something happens to the significant other, I'm out. Like, if, you know what I mean? But for me, I'm like, this is just me personally, I look forward to making that commitment of like when she's really sick and like, let's say she makes a mess, something comes up and I get the chance to clean up after her. You're like, that's so weird. But that's when you actually show the person that you really do love them. That like the mess that you made, I don't care about that. Like, I'm here for you no matter what. That's when it's in a crisis that you get a chance to see that the love is actually tested and it's actually there. It's not when everything's perfect and pretty, you know? And so that's something that you look forward to making that commitment. But rewind, in the dating stage is when you kind of really test to see whether it actually works. And so in a dating stage, you know, you want to look for the, like the Bible says, by their fruits you shall know them. Well, fruit takes time to get ripe. And so you gotta be observing in that period and saying, is this functional, what we have? Because it's gonna just be magnified in marriage. Whatever you have in the dating situation pretty much will just be magnified. And so you have to observe everything and look at, like, are we helping each other? Are we lifting each other? Or is it more work? Is there more friction? Or is it lifting the load of my life overall?
Right. And you can't really, you know, it's true, but on the flip side, you can't really simulate the depth of the darkness or the depth of the, you know, the joy. You can't simulate it.
Exactly.
It's a different level when you say, it's like, again, with children, you know, like if you ask the same question, you know, how far am I willing to go with my child? You know, in my commitment to my child, that's how far. But yes, a powerful point.
Yeah, when from listening to this scenario, it looks like it's loaded, right? So it could be a couple things. It could be that the situation is problematic. It could be that that person is in a crisis right now that needs a special attention. And I think that even when a marriage, if that person is married, if they're in a crisis, get help. If you're not in a crisis, still get help. We see the doctor even when we're not sick or bleeding from the head or something like that. Counsel is not for just unhealthy people, it's for everybody. Also, it could be a matter of a personal issue. Sometimes when we're not walking with the Lord, speaking from a Christian perspective, like if I didn't get up and I didn't say my prayers or whatever, maybe the way Sean looked that morning, I might just be like, and that's because we constantly warring against the flesh and the spirit. So we have to pray, we have to know Jesus, right? It's the Spirit of God that dwells within us that helps us to live godly lives. So if it is a personal grievance, and some people just say, in the Caribbean, they say, she spirit just didn't take, her spirit doesn't take me, like I just don't like that person, or I just don't like my husband, or I just don't really like my wife, and why don't you love your husband? Why don't you love your wife? What is it about them? Are you having conversations? Do you have a friendship with your partner? Right. And then third, I can't remember my third point, so I'll drop it right there.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, my third point was this: learn how to pick your battles and learn how to apologize in your singleness, because you're gonna have to do it when you're married.
Right. Very important. Very, very important. I just want to add to that. I think, as Sarah said, this question comes across as loaded, and I think it's loaded because these real issues happen when you're in a marriage, and sometimes it goes to an extreme where sometimes people don't know what to do. But the first thing I would say is, if you're in any kind of danger, especially physical or any danger that is beyond safety, the first thing to do is to get to a safe place. I am not here to tell you to end your marriage or separate from husband or whatever the case may be, but get to a safe place. And then sometimes that's what it takes to work through the issues. It's not going to stay and allow the person to beat on you, whether it be man or woman that's doing the hitting or abusing in whatever way, but you get to a safe place and then work through the issues. There's no point to stay and keep getting hit or whatever the case may be that is at a point of danger, but you want to start at a place where it makes sense to start from. So safety is of utmost importance, especially if it's physical violence, and then we start working back. Counseling. We're always recommending counseling from this forum, and it's because it makes a huge difference. I'm going to touch on one last question. I think it's really important, and this is why I'm going to put it in there, is how do you stand in your role how do you stand in your will for traditional roles in a world which wants to dismantle them? I think this is a very important question. It is going to be our last one for tonight. Did we catch the question, or should I ask it again?
Yeah, go ahead and ask it again.
How do we stand in our role? Like, how do you stand firm to your, I have a desire to be in the role, let's say I want to be a homemaker, or I want to stand into the roles that God has called me to as a woman. How do I stand in those roles? And how do men stand in their roles that they're called to in a society that's really trying to dismantle the ideas that and the what God has called us to? How do we stand in that when society's saying, let's make it gray?
I think practically speaking, when I was living in BC a few years ago, I met this really wealthy man, and he told me something. And he said that I live simply so that others can live. I live simply so that others can live more. And so when we want to stand in our roles, you have to define those roles as a unit. And then as you define those roles, you have to simplify. The world has so much going on right now. And as you simplify your life and you get yourself in order, you are allowing yourself now to put because a well-ordered house in terms of its finances and all the particulars actually helps you to be able to maintain and manage that and to do it well. And so that's just my answer to that, is to and then one of my favorite saying is simply more, right? So simple, but and actually is more, because once you're able to govern your life in such a way, you're able to maintain exactly what it is that you want to do.
Well, for me personally, I think it's good that everybody has their own little modus operandi, what they live by, their principles. Like for me, whatever's in the Bible, those are my principles. So whoever I'm making a contract with, like I was making with Sean, it has to, cooperate with one another. So in terms of traditions, like I would want to understand what that means for that person, like in terms of like what they mean by that. But generally speaking, if I'm personally a determined individual. So if I'm determined that this is what I want to live by, unless like I'm spiritually weak or something, I'm just going to be living by that. And if somebody else, in any other capacity of a relationship, say a friendship or whatever, they say, okay, well, these are my principles and these are my traditions. I could bend, but I have to see if those comply with the word of God, which is my manual. All right. If it's not compromising anything, I could coincide with that individual within a marriage. Like I can't even really explore that right now. But yeah, like if I'm determined in a certain path, nothing can sway me from that. So I think that just comes down to are you settled in who you are as an individual, no matter what society says, no matter what somebody else says. If you're determined along that path, then I don't think you should be shaken.
I think along with the other points, I think communication is like the most important thing. Spending that time to talk through, hey, what does your ideal relationship look like? What does, it's funny because the word Eden, most people don't know this, but the word Eden in the Bible actually means pleasure. So Adam and Eve were in the midst of pleasure. God put them in pleasure, and that's what he wanted them to experience in their relationship. So like asking your significant other, like, okay, what do you see the relationship dynamic looking like? And what sensitivities do you have? Talking to the person to explore their mind to figure out what those things are as much as possible really helps. I mean, I have a significant other, and I'm doing that right now. She's a lawyer, and I told her one of the things she shared with me was that before she was never willing to give up her work in a relationship. But I told her, listen, if you don't want to work, you don't have to. Like, I'll just run my company and that's it. And so she's like, for the first time, she's like, oh my goodness, now I'm actually interested in doing that, And I felt more comfortable. And I know that if I do have children, I would rather that, I would probably want to do homeschool. That's just a personal thing. And so I lean in that direction. I haven't like firmly decided that, but I lean in that direction. So that's something that kind of works based on the conversations we're having. So yeah, having the conversations, knowing yourself, and then communicating, talking about those things. Don't be afraid. It's better to say too much than to say too little in the dating stage. Does that make sense? Because you don't want to figure out things on the other end. You want to try to, if there's going to be a mess, better to do it now, make the mess now rather than on the other side of marriage. So talking about those things, expressing what's on your heart.
Thank you, guys. Lance, do you have anything to add before we wrap up? We're about to wrap up, guys. Do you have anything you want to add here?
Nah, I mean, I think, like I said, this is something that is not, you can't just cover in a 1 hour plus forum. So there's lots of resources out there. I think if you follow back up, is there a link that you guys can post so people can see the recording?
Yes.
Okay.
And also, I think, we're going to share our contacts. So if anybody individually wants to connect.
Great.
So should we do that now? Like, should we go ahead and like?
Okay, yes, we can do that. I thought Lance was going to continue. Please, guys, if you could share your contact, because I see there's still a lot of questions coming through, and we really want to give everybody a chance to ask. Maybe they have a personal questions for each of you individually or all of you. So if you guys can put your contact in the chat, that would be really great for us to be able to connect with you. Guys, I did say that we had finished with our questions and stuff like that, but I got a a really, really important and I think a serious question that I want to just throw back on the floor. And I'm just going to ask you guys to take really, really like 10 seconds to answer to the best of your ability. It is an important question, so this is why I'm asking it, like all our questions are, but I just wanted to just throw this one in as we're wrapping up. And after we do this, we're just going to share with you guys a topic for next time, and then we're going to pray. Can you please, let's see here. How does someone deal with a partner who has experienced trauma, like maybe sexual abuse as a child? I think we touched on it, but I just want us to reemphasize that. Please, if you could just reemphasize that, because this is a very serious thing to deal with when you're with a person who has experienced trauma, maybe sexually as a child, and now you're married to them or you're considering marrying them.
So I mean, it's two different things. Well, it's kind of the same, but two different. So if you're already married to somebody that somehow has now been discovered that they've experienced this kind of trauma, then, I mean, you need to get, professional help, like, trauma therapy, or like Sarah was saying, like, you don't wait for a crisis, or you don't wait till somebody's sick or not well to get, counseling. So you should already, if you're getting into the point, if you're in a marriage, you should probably search for a solid therapist that you might not be using, but if you had to, you can. And then the same thing as individuals, when you get to the point where you're like, you know what, I'm really contemplating marriage, my next stage in life, you should, as an individual, have a therapist as well, because you have to start to really touch upon the things that were mentioned here, as far as some of the baggage and the issues. We have all these code words for it. Like, you got to really process that, and not process it like, oh yeah, I read a book or I talked to somebody about it. Like, there's sometimes you got to really process. You need some coping mechanisms and tools to really be at peace with some of those and resolve some of those issues, because they are going to impact everything, either consciously or subconsciously. So there's no way that those things should just be treated like, oh, if you're Christian, for example, oh, we're just going to pray about it, or we're just going to talk to the pastor. Like, yeah, that's okay, that's good, but you should get some professional help. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add.
That is perfect. In addition to that, if you're already in a marriage or relationship, find out, like, if your significant other, if your husband, your companion or whatever, do they have relationships like of the same sex? Like, do they have a brotherhood if they're men? Do they have a sisterhood if they're women? I think that's extremely important. And this is something that was highlighted to me after I moved from Canada to the US and living life as a married woman. I'm happily married, but there's just a function and there's just a place for having sisters. So I have amazing sisters. I have Stacy, I have Jillian, I have others. And that amplifies the experience of being a woman, and also helps my marriage, because I'm not going to my husband for everything. Anyway, I segue, but that what Lance said, in addition to that support.
Thank you. Anyone else just want to touch on that specifically? I think Lance really touched on it and really gave some good pointers.
I would say, just in, like, let's say the first conversation happens where the person tells you something, or, something, falls out, and then you start to see a side that you haven't seen before. I think if we're talking about the dating stage, I think the most important thing to do in that moment is to try to affirm the person, to let them know that they're seen and heard. And that will start the pathway of healing, whether you're going to be with them or you're not going to be with them, because this is, let's say it's a new trauma that you're just discovering. The first thing I would say is just affirming the person. There's terms for this in social work, but basically you're just saying, like, wow, I hear you. I didn't know this. I'm hearing how you're feeling, and just affirming that person through whatever it is that they're going through. Like, I'm so sorry, like, and just being there for them. It like, that side of it is not hard to do, because what that does, it just makes them feel safe to basically be able to take the next step that they need to take, which might be counseling, which might be just, a moment of silence or crying or whatever's going on. But I would say, if you're experiencing that for the first time, just letting a person know that you're there, you're not going to run away. Because for some people, like, the trauma response is like they have it, and then people have left them in their past. And so if you leave right then, walk away, like, it might just, like, you know what I mean, totally, do more damage. So just affirm in the moment that something might happen. That's advice I would give.
Oh yeah, and might I also add too, it's very easy. I don't know how it works with women, but for men, like when we see a woman, especially if we're already interested or we find her attractive, we see a woman, and then we get alerted to all of this suffering and all this stuff, we automatically like we want to help, you know, we're gonna fix it, like we want to, so you know, try to, oh, I wouldn't say avoid, but try to make sure that you're being balanced in your approach. Don't ever feel like you're compelled to move forward in a relationship with somebody out of pity, for example, or out of sympathy or empathy, like that. Those can't be motivating factors.
100%.
Thank you guys so much. This really helped. I'm very thankful that we took the time to answer that question. The other thing I just want to add to that briefly is keep in mind that if you're already married to someone who now is exuding trauma, or is basically talking about trauma or exuding reactions to something that was traumatic, sometimes the first thing for us to do is to say, how could you not tell me this? You lied, you kept secrets. Sometimes that really isn't the case, is that when people go through certain traumas, they lock them away and they don't really want to talk about it. They don't want to face it. They don't want to deal with it. And sometimes a trauma does not come back up until you're in the midst of a situation that is likened onto the trauma that you experienced. So I think Nomiko said it very well. Be merciful, and not just be merciful, be kind and loving. When you see any kind of expression of this trauma, know that you don't want to re-traumatize a person that has already been traumatized. You want to really be kind and help them to be able to feel safe to talk about it, to express themselves. And as was shared by Lance, get help. It's so important to talk to someone outside of the person you're with. While that person is a safe place, they're not objective. And so it's really important, if you're dealing with trauma, to go and get some help outside of that person. That's really going to help you to uproot that stuff that you've been hiding and holding on to, because it will continue to come up if we don't take the time to assess something that is deep rooted. This conversation has been so rewarding, so fulfilling for me. I truly believe that it has been for all of us. I see so many questions, so many things popping up in the chat. And I know that the conversation is going to continue because you guys have shared your contacts, and I know everybody wants to continue talking to all of you guys because you've shared such great points. I want to invite you guys to come back with us next week, as we have an amazing evening again planned for you. We have surprises throughout the next month that's coming up that we want to share with you, and we want to continue to enjoy with you guys. We're going to be talking to the ladies. You're going back to just ladies. And we're going to be talking to the ladies about how does someone, sorry there, I'm reading the wrong question here. We just want to talk to the ladies about how to basically come into your womanhood, how to really form your identity as a woman and become whole as a woman. And so as we say goodnight for tonight, we are looking forward to seeing you guys next week as we talk about being whole as a woman. We are on a journey of wholeness with ourselves, but most importantly, wholeness with Christ. And so please come back next week as we talk about that. We're going to say a word of prayer. Lance, if you can just pray for us as we close, we'll really appreciate that.
All right, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to come and share perspective and feedback and get insight as to what readiness looks like. I know, Lord, there's much more for us to know and to learn and to experience, so we ask for wisdom and power to make right decisions as we navigate through choices and through our experience. And we ask for your blessing, those of us that are already married, those of us that are single. We know that you will provide for all of our necessity, and that you will continue to teach us to love you more and to love each other as ourselves. And we pray for your blessing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you guys so much for your patience with us tonight. We went over a bit, but I hope that it was a blessing. And we hope to see you all next week. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, everyone.
Good
Thanks for the
night.
opportunity, guys.
Hi, thank you.
Enjoy
Bye.
the
Party time.
Enjoy the rest of the year.
Yes.
Take care, guys. Bye, Nomiko. Bye, Stace. Bye, Lance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian.
Good night. Have a good lesson.
Bye, everyone.
Good
And if
night.
you want the recordings, you can go to our YouTube at A Foretaste of Heaven on YouTube for whoever is still there. All right, I'm gonna jump off.
Okay.
I'm gonna end it, yeah.